Coming in, of course, next March, I think, on schedule. As well as Andrea, whom you've met, we're joined by Trevor Brocklebank, Chief Exec and co-founder of Home Instead Senior Care, one of the biggest providers in the sector. Heather David, founder and co-owner of Mid Yorkshire Care, a rather smaller provider. We heard from both Trevor and Heather in questions earlier, so they're nicely warmed up. And Andy Tilden, who is Director of Sector Development at Skills for Care, the sector skills agency. He's been heavily involved with Health Education England in working on the care certificate. So I might just ask him to do a quick minute or 2 minutes on what it's all about.
Yeah, and I've got my shin pads on as well, so I'm prepared. Actually, Dave, if you don't mind, I'm not going to go through the science bit because people have got the information that was handed out, and I think we've got 2 oversubscribed workshops. What I wanted to do, and is this my 3 minute? Yes. I'm allowed. Okay. What I wanted to do is to tease out 3 issues really. An employer described the care certificate to me as a compromise certificate. What I want to, how I like to think of it is we're trying to achieve balance with this care certificate, and we're trying to achieve this balance in 3 ways. One, Camilla Cavendish from the Sunday Times thought it would be great to have a certificate that went across health and social care, and this morning we had a debate about integration, and so this is an attempt to look at induction across health and social care. As employers will know, we've had the common induction standards in social care. This is an attempt to have something similar based on the common induction standards across health and social care. So there's a kind of a balance trying to be achieved. There's also a balance that's trying to be achieved between robustness and minimal burden. And I note that Bridget wrote in your newsletter some of the issues around the care certificate because it's an employer-given certificate. We're trying to achieve a balance of something that's robust, where managers can ensure themselves that staff can do and know, but also there's some minimal burden, because we know if you went to a training provider, if you went to a warden organisation, price goes up, but also time taken to complete goes up as well. So we're trying to achieve a balance. And finally, we're trying with the care certificate to develop something that's portable, but at the same time recognises that each service is unique, and more importantly, the people receiving care and support are unique. So we want something that you can say as an employer, when you employ someone who's got a care certificate, yes, they've got something, but at the same time, you still need to assure yourself that this person can do and know. So we're trying to achieve a balance there. So 3 kind of balances, rather think of it that way than a kind of compromise.
Thank you very much, Andy. Let's hear from our 2 providers, because, of course, this is going to be an employer-awarded certificate, and therefore the burden is falling very much on the sector. Trevor, could I just remind you to speak into the mic? I think people in the last session were having some difficulty picking up the voices, so can you speak into the mic? Thank you.
In principle, I think it's a great idea. One of the things we talked about in David's session was the need for a quality workforce that are trained, well paid and well respected. And I think a common certificate on a par with their peers in the health sector is a great idea. However, the devil is always in the detail. So if I can give you some examples. Many of our carers only work a few hours a week. So some of the assessment just isn't practical. They need to demonstrate a hearing aid, for example. Some of their clients may not have a hearing aid. We also need to demonstrate food hygiene. We don't provide food to all our clients. It also needs to be assessed by the care manager. Carers work isolated in the field, so they don't have a supervisor with them all the time. We talk about assessors needing to be occupationally competent, but there's no definition or framework of what occupationally competent means, and that's been a challenge we've had before when that's been open to interpretation. There's a particular issue around CPR training. The care certificate says every carer needs to have CPR training. Now, if you think there's 1.5 million or so people working in the industry, and let's say they need 4 hours of training each, that's a £10 million cost just in paying people minimum wage to do that. plus where's all the training resources going from? And actually, I think it could be quite dangerous. You don't want someone who had CPR training 12 months ago thinking they know what to do. You want someone ringing 999, speaking to a paramedic. They'll actually teach you, they'll talk you through how to apply CPR in the way they want. So when the paramedic arrives, they know exactly what's happened. There's also a particular concern for me around, if you look at the common induction standards as well as the handbook, we've got the framework. Whereas my understanding is we'll just have a framework and only a few weeks after it's delivered for it to be implemented. And we'll only know if what we've done is acceptable when CQC inspectors. So potentially I've got 7,500 people I'm going to train, and let's say it's £100 a head. That's pulling a number out of the air. That's £750,000. I could train everybody to be told, actually, that's unacceptable. I've no problem spending money on good training, but I can't afford to do £750,000 twice because it wasn't right the first time round. We also have a challenge with some inspectors being inconsistent. We have 160 officers in England, so it's not a criticism, it's the reality of different people interpret things in a different way. We have new training at the moment. In the same week, one inspector said it was outstanding, one said it was not compliant. But that's with something that's established against a framework when you can say whether it is or it isn't. And again, I don't mind which way it is. If someone tells us, then we'll make sure we comply and we'll get everybody right. So I think there's a lot of operational details, and my concern is we're rushing it through, and we need to, this is a great idea. We've got one chance to get it right. We need to get it right rather than get it in.
Heather, do you agree it's being rushed through?
Yes. Yes, I do. What I would say is that I really welcome the emphasis, more emphasis on competency. But for me and my organisation, this isn't anything new, because the essential standards of quality and safety, which is what we've all been working to for the last 4 years until the new fundamental standards are coming in, actually several of the outcomes make it the responsibility of the registered manager for the competency of the people that go out and do the work. And within our own organisation, we have always put more emphasis on competency than actually tick boxing for training. So we've already actually got that sort of structure in place. I think what concerns me a little bit are the practicalities around the sort of prescribed levels of supervision of new members of staff, particularly in the domiciliary care setting. That also leads on to issues around dignity for the service user. You know, this is one of the things that we talk about so much, the dignity for the service users. Is it dignified to have a whole load of people traipsing through your house, assessing the competency of the people that are providing your care? And this is something that I think we've all got to look at. I really do welcome the idea of a certificate based on competency, but the practicalities of doing it, I can see it being far easier to do it in a healthcare setting, for instance, than to do it in the domiciliary setting, because we all know that providing care to people at home is a very special thing, and people just like to see the same people coming in, and they don't want endless people coming in, I don't think. So that's one of the things that I'm concerned about. Another thing is tied in with that, and that is the length of time that before somebody can work unsupervised. You know, there is somewhere in the guidance that I've read about being in the direct vision of line of vision for supervision, which again, how does that quite work within the domiciliary care setting? Will we be able to trust other providers' care certificates? Because I'm not going to. I can tell you that now. I don't trust other providers' training, full stop. What I will do within my own organisation is, if somebody comes to me, I accept an NVQ qualification, a diploma qualification, but we still look very much at competency within the first few weeks of working to see that actually that is actually right. So I wonder what value a portable care certificate is going to have for me. I can't see it because I don't trust it at the moment. So unless it's accredited, and I agree with Andy, and I know that they've been trying to get this balance between portability and the whole accreditation thing, none of us could afford to have it accredited. So I can't see that it's going to make a huge lot of difference, to be honest. That's basically my summing up of it.
Seems to be the mood of the room, Andrea. Great idea. All in favour, lots of goodwill, but actually it's not been thought through very well.
Thankfully, Andy's going to take on the mantle and thinking it through for the future. I think that there were a few things for us to think about here. The first is, why do we want to do it? Why did we actually identify that this was an issue that needed to be tackled? And I think that we know that people who are using services across health and social care have complex needs. Actually, it's a really tough job for people to do, from an emotional, psychological, social kind of perspective, as well as the practical competency side of things. So making sure that we've got people who are competent, confident and capable of doing that job, I don't think anybody could disagree with. So I think that sort of the starting out point, which is saying, yes, this is a good thing, I can understand why people say that. And I'm sure that that was in Camilla's mind when she wrote her report. What I'm really interested in making sure, though, is that we take advantage of the framework that this gives us and focus on the outcomes in terms of what impact does it have on the people who are using services. So, the point that you were making, Heather, about kind of checking that people were actually, competent once you'd got them, whatever their previous skills or qualifications were. That, I think, is one of the things that we've really got to make sure is kind of embedded in the assessment, but is also embedded in the ongoing support and development for people. Because actually the training and support that people need isn't just at the beginning of them starting to do this job. We need to sustain it. And the final thing I'd say is that actually I think this is important. I think we should be trying to make sure that we're doing it right. And if we are committed to ensuring that people who are living in the most vulnerable of circumstances get the right support, then we should be making sure that the money is available to train them properly and to support them properly. And there's a variety of different ways that we need to get into that conversation, but that I think has got to be a starting point. We would not kind of countenance people running nurseries for small children without them having the appropriate qualifications and support. I really don't think that we should be countenancing it for people with a learning disability if they're elderly or living with dementia.
Andy, I mean, without external accreditation or assurance, is it really going to be worth the paper it's written on? Heather says she's not going to trust any other employers' sign-off.
Yes, I think it is. And I think we deliberately wanted to set the bar low for people coming into the sector. You set the bar high, was the advice we received, and employers in the room are going to struggle to get a workforce. So we were very keen to set a bar fairly low, to take the assurances of managers when they're looking at staff that they know what to do and they know how to do it. But that once we've got staff engaged within the workplace, then there are other opportunities. So there are diplomas and there are apprenticeships available for staff. You set an accredited qualification for staff as they come through the door, and we know that many staff will leave. That's a cost that the employer's made, and they've gone out of the door before the person's undertaken any work. So it's a kind of balance that we have tried to set based on evidence that we receive from employers saying, let's get workers in and let's work with people once we've gone through the value-based recruitment process, et cetera, et cetera. David, can I just take the opportunity to come back on the assessment issue, if I may? Trevor's absolutely right, and you may be unsurprised to know Trevor's not been quiet in letting me and colleagues know that point, but equally nor have UKHCA. So it began with Colin Angel in initial kick-off groups, and it's followed on with Bridget, who sits on the Cavendish Government's assurance boards. Those points have been made, and they've been very well made, and they have been listened to. So many of the points, and there was a lot in what Trevor said, and I can obviously go back to Trevor, I can go back to UKHCA after this and go through a detailed response. But the specific one around assessing in somebody's own home has absolutely been taken on the chin, and we accept that as employers. You will still want to ensure yourself that your worker can do and know, but that will not mean you're going to have to traipse around people's home after home after home. So in our new advice and guidance, based on the feedback we've received, we will be producing some guidance that will make it more readable and understandable for home care workers as it has been for health. So one of the assurances, hopefully, that I can give here.
Heather wants to come in, but if you want to chip in, any observations, questions, as before, stick your hand up, we'll come to you. Heather.
There's something about the people assessing being occupationally competent. Now, the way we do it at the moment, and as I say, we have for the last 4 years, we've had a very strong emphasis on competency. So for things where you really need to be competent, like, for instance, safe moving and handling, the safe administration of medication, we have people with a lot of extra training who actually do the training of our new workforce, and then they go out and assess their competency in the workplace so that I can then sign off on the, we already have the certificate, the Skills for Care Certificate of Completion of the Common Induction Standards. Well, we use that. And I can't sign that off. I can't sign that off if I don't know that people are competent. So it's what level of occupational competency is going to be acceptable for CQC inspectors, because I would say that for moving and handling and for medication administration, I would still want my trainers who also go out and assess competency. That to me tells me that the people are properly competent. But for things like whether people are using their gloves and aprons properly, whether they're washing their hands before they cook a meal, or whatever it is that they're doing, I would hope that maybe we could use the people who the new staff are shadowing, and we always shadow new staff with existing members of staff. I'm getting a bit into the nitty-gritty here, but I think we need to think about how we're going to do it. Now, with those things, I think you need to think about that, Andrea, with your inspectors, as to what exactly occupational competency is going to be. And, at the risk, I don't want to take over the panel, but there are so many different elements of this, going back to the workforce, for instance. We've always prided ourselves on taking new people or bringing new people into care and training them properly. I'm sure there's quite a few people in this room who like to do the same thing. But are we all going to be doing only taking people that have got care certificates? Because if they're portable, and if people are not going to be like me and not trust the portability of the care certificate, then people are only going to take people who've already got a care certificate, because they're not going to want to have to go into all that expense of doing it. So there's implications. We struggle so much for staff already, so that's an issue. And I'll finish, and I won't say any more. What about the insurance implications? If we're signing people off, and there's a portable certificate, and we're saying that in our opinion, this person is competent to practice, are we then going to have to start to take out extra insurance? I have asked our insurers, who haven't come back to me yet on this, but they do seem to think that there may very well be an insurance implication as well. So there's a lot to think about.
Hold your response to that, Andrea. Let's take one or two thoughts from the floor. Madam.
Hello, I'm Dominique Kent from the Good Care Group. We specialise in providing living care to people in their own homes. I also sit on the board of the UKHCA. I'd written some questions down before I came into here today, and it's quite interesting to note that the first thing I've written down is concept is great, so kind of supporting Trevor's comment, and we've got no issue with meeting the learning requirements that are set out. We already do that through the training that we provide our carers. However, implementation is another matter, so kind of underlining the piece that's already been said about implementation. There are some significant areas that the care certificate doesn't seem to have taken into account around the logistics in the domiciliary care sector and the live-in care sector. And to kind of reinforce Heather's point about will we take people with a care certificate, it's not practical. You know, if we're going to bring people into this business and hire them through a values-based recruitment process, that means we're going to bring people into the business that may not have previous care experience. We need to do that because the workforce challenge is absolutely massive. So this care certificate needs to consider that. How do we make sure we enable people to grow and develop through this sector, a sector that actually can be a really rewarding place for people to work? 75% of my clients live with dementia. How do we make sure we supervise and assess well in that context? We're going to create anxiety levels that are just unnecessary. So we need to consider those issues when we think about assessment as well. And just kind of kicking your shin pads, Andy, a little bit. Hearing the point about new advice and guidance, great, but what does that actually mean? We've got lots of providers out here who are working their way through the detail of the care certificate. It would be great to see some of that now so that we've got time to prepare ourselves for next April.
Thank you very much. Let's hear some more thoughts. There's a hand right over this side, I think. And if you want to come in, just indicate.
Jodie Chatters from Midas Care. I just wanted to quickly just ask a question about the ongoing processes of the certificate. Obviously, any observation and assessment is only genuine or actually valid for that one single episode of being observed. And, you know, in the broad spectrum of health and social care, especially in domiciliary, how will that continued assessment be valid, you know, taken in respect of people's different illnesses, their well-being, their frame of mind, maybe the level of challenging behaviours that they may present on a good day, a bad day? You know, how will the ongoing assessment for this care certificate, once it's been issued, continue?
Trevor, before I come to Andy and Andrea, do you want to just underscore any of those points?
Absolutely. I think everybody wants a good qualification, but it's got to be implemented well. I also think, taking some of your points, one of the things, this is very much a task-based training based on traditional dom care, which is very much personal care. Less than half the care we provide involves the personal care element. And we have people coming for training wanting to be a companion, taking people out, particularly someone with learning disabilities, where it's about encouraging them to integrate into the community. They do 2 days of training and they've had hoists and personal care and we never see them again, because that's not. So we've got to be careful the one size fits all doesn't fit the way care used to be, rather than the way care is going to be.
Interesting. Andy?
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm coming to the Living Care Group meeting in January, and I think you've already written to me about those specifics. And again, I'd say good points, well made. Are they considered in the common induction standards? Yes. Have they really been considered in detail in the care certificate, which is across health and social care? Less so. Have we got some work to do to change that guidance to make sure it's specific? Yes. Should you have to fit into the care certificate? No. Should the care certificate be wrapped around your service? Yes. So there is still work to do. And on the launch of the standards, and I'm not passing the buck here because I kind of own the care certificate, but unlike the common induction standards, this is a Secretary of State's baby. And government goes into PERDA in March before the election, so there will be an announcement about the care certificate then. There'll be a soft launch in January, so we'll know what the care certificate looks like. It's still taking into account feedback that we've received from the pilot. You'll hear more about this in the workshop, but we're expecting the care certificate to be launched. Our advice to government was that providers need at least 6 months to change from what they're doing now to what they'll be doing in the future. And actually the reality is good providers will be penalised more than those providers that don't do it. And that's what we've told government. So I'm expecting government, when they soft launch the care certificate, to make allowances. I know from speaking with CQC colleagues, they'll take a proportionate approach, that if you're actually demonstrating that you are taking your staff through a relevant induction, since the kind of soft launch, allowances would be made. But our advice was specifically 6 months. The question about ongoing assessment, and this is where I probably do need my shin pads. I'd ask yourself the question: how do you know your staff are doing a good job anyway? And really, I hope that what the care certificate is a manifestation and a kind of a view that demonstrates that you know the worker that you're funding to go and do that job knows it and can do it. So I'd throw it back to you and say, not you personally, because I think you're asking a question on behalf of everyone, but so how do you know now? And all this is a kind of manifestation of that. If the clunky bits get in the way, and I absolutely take on Trevor's points and colleagues' points, we need to address the clunky bits. But really, it should be a certificate that someone gets that says, look, you know they can do the job and you know they know how to do the job. On the portability one, I've not yet met one employer that says they'll accept the care certificate from someone else. Camilla Cavendish thought this was a good idea to actually give care staff something so that they learn something once and it's something that will go with them. We know that each service is different, and more importantly, we know the needs of people who receive care and support are different. So I suspect that portability one will just drift into the wilderness.
Andrea.
Just to pick up a few of the comments that people have made. How will CQC respond? I'm with Andy in terms of the conversations that he's obviously having with colleagues at CQC. We will have a proportionate approach, and the critical thing for us is, are people actually being supported in terms of their induction and their training to do the job that they need to do so they can provide safe, high quality, effective, compassionate care. So that's kind of the fundamental thing. What we were just kind of whispering to each other to check out while we were on the panel, so it's all organised as you can tell, is that one of the things that I think it would be very useful for us to do is to have something jointly produced between Skills for Care and the Care Quality Commission, so that we can say this is what we're going to be taking from the work that Skills for Care have been doing, so that you know what it is that our inspectors will be looking at. And equally, I can be clear with the inspectors as to what I'm expecting them to do as well. So we can make you that commitment today. You heard it here first. So we can do that. And then finally, on the ongoing situation, again, I'd back Andy here. This is about, the care certificate is about kind of fundamentals. It's a baseline. It's not expected to be the be-all and end-all of life in terms of enabling people to do the job forever and a day, and responding to increasing needs or different circumstances that might need additional skills. And I think that what we would be interested in looking at, in particularly in asking the question, is the service responsive, is actually thinking about what are you doing to be able to assess what the changing needs of people who are using the service are, whether you have the workforce that's got the capacity, capability and confidence to deliver on that, and if not, what are you doing to put in place the appropriate support, training and development that enables them to do so in the future. So it would be the ongoing bit that we would continue to look at, not just the care certificate.
We're running short of time, but I just want to squeeze in a gentleman who's been trying to come in for a while. Gentleman there.
Hi, thank you. Steve Mills from Do Care. I've got an observation and a question. The observation is that it's tough enough doing what we do as it is. And this care certificate, if I remember rightly, the politics was to do with hospitals and healthcare assistants not being trained. So the frustration that I have about the dom care sector is that it feels to me like we're an afterthought. So we had the common induction standards, which were there and happening. So we then get the whole political brouhaha to do with the care certificate, and then we get a set of guidance which doesn't work for us, and then what feels like an afterthought is, oh, well, we'll redo it to make it dom care focused. So it's a tough enough job as it is without us being an afterthought with these changes. And the question, I won't bother to try and shoehorn it into a care certificate question. It's for Andrea, and I didn't manage to get it in last time round. Earlier in the year, there was the stuff to do with 15-minute visits and dementia. So I will attempt to shoehorn it into the care certificate.
Briefly as you can.
When we're training our staff, what should our guidance be to them about if they come across a client that they believe has got dementia and we're only doing 15-minute visits, as in what would the inspector's perspective on that be?
Okay, deal with that in your response, Andrea. I'll come to you at the end. But just on the Steve's first point, I mean, Trevor, does this feel like social care is being sort of spatchcocked into something that's really was about mid-staffs and healthcare assistants?
Yes.
You're a chair's dream.
No, I think...
But it can expand.
Yeah, and I think the other issue is one of portability. I think we're hearing from everybody here that any reputable care provider would want to redo it because what they do is different ways of operating. Some people focus on dementia, some on LD, different areas. So there's a real risk if it's portable. The only people that will benefit are the people who are trying to exploit the service and do it cheaply. So I think it could actually have quite the opposite of what it's trying to achieve.
Heather?
I agree.
Another chair's dream.
Andy?
Well, I might be another chair's green because I don't agree. UKHCA were at the table right at the beginning, and UKHCA said the very things that you mentioned. What we wanted to do, and more importantly, what Department of Health wanted to do, though, was they wanted to pilot it, and they didn't want to listen to my voice, to colleagues from UKHCA's voices, other voices at that point. They said, let's go pilot it. We've piloted it. We've listened to the feedback from people in the room here, and so we're changing. Yes, it did come from health, but we had this morning talking about integration, and we've actually got to start somewhere, and this feels like a one point of starting. So if the end product didn't focus on the needs of home care, I'd have a problem. I don't think it will.
Andrea?
Okay, I shall ask your question to me, and well done for getting it in. So what would we be looking at? We'd be looking at the 5 key questions. We'd be saying, is it safe? Is it caring? Is it effective? Is it responsive? And is it well led? And I think that if somebody is living with dementia, we know that they may have high levels of confusion, they may be agitated, they will want to they will want to they don't want people rushing in and rushing out, because that will exacerbate their levels of agitation and confusion, and probably make them feel even worse. I don't think it's safe, if you're doing that in terms of you're going in for 15 minutes to kind of leave somebody something to eat. Well, how can we make sure that they're actually eating it and getting the nutrition and hydration that they require to live safely? Caring, obviously, it's incredibly difficult, and we hear time and again, every time we listen to a story of a care worker, they're concerned that they're not able to provide that human touch if they're doing it very, very quickly, and not able to have a chat and to actually get be able to treat somebody with the dignity and respect that they deserve. Is it effective? Well, not if you're not able to do all of the things that you're expected to do within that period of time, because somebody who's living with dementia, it may well take longer to do some of the things that you and I kind of take 5 or 10 minutes in the morning to do. Is it responsive to their needs? Well, again, probably not, in terms of if they've actually had a bad morning, and you need to spend more time to respond to that at the point where you're actually getting them the lunch, whatever it may be, or providing a level of personal care, then I think that we would not be seeing that it was responsive. And clearly, there'd be a question of the leadership and the management. And I do understand the tension between the contracts with local authorities and providers. But actually, as Richard Priest was saying earlier, providers can push back, can actually be highlighting and advocating on behalf of their clients to say this isn't appropriate. But equally, providers have got to look to themselves, and we do know that there are some very poor practices out there in terms of people cutting corners around the time available, and travel and not counting in travel time as effectively as they should. So I'm not going to get into who's the rights and wrongs in terms of how we ended up there, but I will be asking those questions, and if they're not being, if we can't answer them positively, then we will be saying so.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Obviously, a lot of feeling around the care certificate issue, the conversation to be continued in the workshops this afternoon. Andy's going off to get half-time treatment on his bruises. Please thank him and the rest of the panel very warmly.